Greetings and salutations, Internet. Today is Wolfphototech, and here we go with another quickie review. I've used this quite extensively of Spellbook cards, Cleric, and pretty much with most of these cards, I have used them quite a few times. And you have a nice big pile of cards. There's no plastic sleeve left in there because I tossed it at one point. There's 153 cards in this set. This pretty much is just from the core rule, the player's handbook. There's some blank cards in there. If you notice that there's some cards that are upside down, that's because there's a smudge from possibly when I used it, or was that actually on there always? But anyways, there's the name of the card on the top. There's how many actions and range and components and duration. The C next to duration stands for concentration. Down here is the general information text. And then normally down here at the very bottom, there would be a section for upcasting, but this is a cantrip. I got a smudge on the back of the card. On the back of the card, there's a number typically designating if it is a cantrip or what level it is. Say like right here, that's a level 1 spell. All the basic information. In the case of these cards, if the spell is longer than the zone or gets pretty darn close to it, it will say down here, see page for more information. There's the upcast effect. And on these cards, as you can see, there is the Cleric and then the subclass text down here. And that basically covers the general gist. The cards are actually fairly well made and sturdy. They're manufactured by Gale Force 9, or designed by them to be more specific. I don't know what company they subcontract for manufacturing. Here's a example of my mirror image from the Trickery Cleric with a little extra text down there says see page H. So there. V stands for verbal, S stands for somatic, M is material, and then there will be an R for royalty if it happens to be a spell that has a royalty tied to it, which is only a handful cards from Acquisitions Inc. This deck is entirely all spells from the player's handbook. Overall, this is a useful starter aid, as with all these decks, for new players to Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition when they're just limited to, say, like the player's handbook spells, which is not terribly a bad idea because they easily get new players easily lose track of stuff, and these are handy enough that you can set them out across the table. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 spell levels, each one you have for that spell level. However, it is important to note once you get past like 4 levels of spells, the area starts taking up on the tabletop starts getting a little restrictive, and not to mention having so many spells laid out across starts to get overwhelming for some people. For the overall, in principle, these cards, or this concept of keeping spells in card form is actually quite neat. The problem is that in the case of the official spellbook cards, these are often lacking a lot of the erratas, and they don't add new cards to the set later on. There is exceptions to that with in some cases. In the case of Gale Force 9 and Wizards of the Coast, they only did the Xanathar's set. There is no Tashas, and there is no Tashas and no miscellaneous spells from various books, which there's not very many spells in miscellaneous books. Mostly Rime of the Frost Maiden. A few of the setting books have spells in them, like Acquisitions Incorporated and Rime of the Frost Maiden. And then in Fizban's Treasure of Dragon, they have new spells in it. There's no card sets from Gale Force 9 for those at all. Just I know that there's a lot of people who look for the Artificer spell deck. There isn't a Artificer spell deck. So, sorry. As a starting aid for a new player who just has the player's handbook, these are actually pretty good. These are like a 3.5 star score, maybe 4. You know, it's kind of in that range. However, as Wizards of the Coast adds erratas and adds new spells to the player spell, the character class spell list, and there's more subclasses being added, these spell decks start to become holy. And it's really funny I use that word while holding the Cleric spell deck, because there's all the newer subclasses from after Xanathar's on are not added into these spell decks, which is quite sad. As I said, there's 153 cards. This is still useful for a new player. So it is still worth like 3.5 stars. However, as people move forward into using like D&D Beyond, which is actually superior to this. However, D&D Beyond is a digital platform. You have to spend money on it, and it's a continuous expense on it. And in case the internet goes out, you lose access to it. Where in the case of these cards, you always have these cards as long as you don't throw them away, destroy them, or anything like that. So there's a bonus value to having cards. Reason why I'm making sure to doubly do all the spell decks for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition is because it makes it really interesting when I get to the Pathfinder 2nd edition spell cards and Starfinder spell cards, the quality difference. For a D&D product, 5th edition, official, these are actually pretty good. After that, it kind of starts falling a little bit. As I said, good for starting a new player with limited spells. Doesn't really grow with them after a while, so the value kind of falls off. It starts for new players at 3.5. If you know the spells or you have D&D Beyond, there's really not much reason to buy these unless you really want to have them or a physical copy. In that case, if you already have D&D Beyond and you already have all the spells from your game Dungeon Master's account, or you went and bought all the books on D&D Beyond ends up just being a more convenient, effective way to use this. There's also third-party companies that produce cards like this, like Hit Point Press, which are actually better quality overall, but they also lag behind in some areas as well, because Wizards of the Coast controls a lot of that stuff very precisely. So if you have D&D Beyond, or you just simply want to use classes or newer spells, this is not the strongest item, but it is a good starting point. And they also, as I showed you, give you clear cards. You can also always... Oh my goodness. You can always use index cards as well to fill in the spots that you're missing. So if you have spells, you can always write them out on index cards and include them in your stack of deck, you know? And you can always update the index cards or just such for your spells. So, thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a delightful day, a nice night, a wonderful week, and see you next time.